So, folks, we have to talk about the fact that Israel is currently engaging and ramping up its ethnic cleansing operations as well as its genocidal operations. We have to engage with that reality. And this is not going to be the most feel-good story in the world, but I think it's important information people need to know. In particular, earlier today, uh, Netanyahu announced plans for the Israeli military to seize 70% of Gaza. And this is, in fact, going to be catastrophic. Some of the analysis from Al Jazeera here, courtesy of Khalid El Gindi, senior fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, said that this basically blows apart any kind of diplomatic agreements that Israel had committed itself to, obviously, but also is straight up and says, Israel has no right to do this. No right under international law, no right under anything other than might makes right. This is against even what Donald Trump was saying he would allow Israel to do. This is beyond that, because Donald Trump was basically saying you could take half of the Gaza Strip. They're taking 70% of it, right? And it is really disgusting and bad. Obviously, just the other day we talked about how Senator Chris Van Hollen came out saying, we need to actually put teeth behind any kind of two-state solution. We need that includes like putting sanctions on Israel if they do not comply with a two-state solution. It implies, having enforcement mechanisms in our diplomacy with Israel in order to facilitate a Palestinian state. This is effectively Benjamin Netanyahu realizing that there is a limited amount of time available to him before Donald Trump gets out of office, and the American public has, by and large, turned on supporting Israel's actions blindly, right? And this, in turn, means that there is an urgency now. And that urgency means that we are seeing acceleration both in this massive land grab from Gaza, but also in the rate of violence towards settlers, or not towards settlers, towards Palestinians by settlers in the occupied West Bank and in East Jerusalem. This violence is backed by the IDF, meaning that Israeli settlers from the illegal settlements come and destroy Palestinian land. They attack Palestinians, they kill Palestinians, and in an effort to drive them off of the places that their families have lived for generations. And if a Palestinian responds, the IDF is there to arrest those Palestinians or kill those Palestinians. And this process has been accelerating, this expansion of the settlements accelerating. It is causing a great deal of damage and is, in effect, a massive ethnic cleansing campaign of territory that the settler colonial movement in Israel views as rightfully theirs, part of the greater Israel expansionist movement. What we're seeing is policies geared towards the empowerment of that settler colonial movement. It breaks my heart to talk about, because where we're at is it's going to get worse. And effectively, I do think that something like this does kill what Senator Chris Van Hollen was talking about in his op-ed the other day. There is no longer, in my opinion, any future for a two-state solution, right? But there is a future for a one-state solution. And very specifically here, a one-state solution is reliant on the idea that Israel functionally, right now, is an apartheid state. Israel functionally controls the occupied territories. They are occupied. And the occupied territories are full of Palestinians that exist under a completely separate set of laws that apply only to Palestinians, right? You have different rights depending on whether you're a Palestinian in different parts of Israel than if you are an Israeli. This isn't right. And The issue is with the one-state solution, and the reason why the Netanyahu government and those who agree with them, which is the majority of the Knesset, of course, reject the idea of a one-state solution is because it would dilute the power of it would dilute the status quo. It would introduce a large influx of Palestinians who, if you were to end an apartheid state and enfranchise these newcomers into Israel, would result in a large demographic shift. And that demographic shift would change the balance of political power forever. And that's why Israel hasn't formally annexed any of these occupied territories. It's why Israel has drawn out these peace agreements or peace negotiations for decades and undermined them in order to avoid having any finality applied here. It is to perpetuate this de facto apartheid state that needs to end, right? It needs to end because, frankly, there's not really any other option on the table anymore. Because what is happening right now is intolerable. It is killing incalculable numbers of civilians who are Palestinians. Every day there are stories coming out of Israeli drone strikes on people in Gaza, and people in Gaza are like destitute. Like entire cities have been leveled, in some cases quite literally by bulldozers. What we're looking at is essentially either there is a completed genocide, a completed ethnic cleansing, which is, I think, the preferred outcome for a lot of the people who hold power within Israel. Or we have a solution where Palestinians are enfranchised. This, again, is also an unacceptable solution for, again, people with power in Israel. But we're getting to a point where they got to pick one, and it's becoming clearer and clearer as time goes by to people in America that which option the Israeli government wants to pick. But, I mean, worth noting here, speaking in West Bank settlement, Israeli prime minister who's fighting for political survival before election says we are squeezing Hamas. Again, he makes this announcement on purpose in a West Bank settlement, an illegal West Bank settlement. It's deliberate. It is to reinforce the intention here, the intention to annihilate the Palestinian people. Under the US brokered ceasefire in October, the Israeli army withdrew to a demarcation line which gave Israel direct control of 53% of the occupied territory. Since then, Israeli forces have steadily advanced their positions westward into Hamas-controlled half of the Strip and declared an ever-expanded no-man's land west of that, within which they claim the right to decide who can enter and open fire on anyone they perceive as a threat. Again, because they have been violating the ceasefire since its inception. And now that that violation is being formalized. We are currently squeezing Hamas, Netanyahu said. We now control 60% of the territory in the Strip. We were at 50, we moved to 60. My directive is to move to 70. And it's very clear that their intention is not to stop there. It's to move to 100%. And if you are thinking, well, I mean, Jack, maybe you're reading too much into it. Maybe it's just to get out all Hamas, Maybe it's to get rid of all of Hamas, right? Well, there was actually a third option I didn't describe earlier, which is, maybe some of these leaders want a more palatable option than just every Palestinian dies. And some of the leadership in Israel thinks they've come up with that brilliant third way. What exactly do you think that is? Oh, that's right. They're just formally endorsing ethnic cleansing. The defense minister, Israel Katz, said on Wednesday that the government's ultimate aim was for large numbers of Palestinians to leave Gaza by what he called voluntary migration, but what human rights activists describe as a long-term plan for ethnic cleansing by making living conditions inside Gaza intolerable. Hence why they have restarted the blockade on aid. Hence why they are creating kill zones where people have previously been told they'll be safe. It is just to move the line, inch it forward little by little, make it unlivable until as many people as possible are gone, expelled out into other countries, so that when Israel does formally annex these areas, it doesn't have that massive demographic shift that threatens the entrenched political powers that be. That's what they're aiming to do here. They're aiming to have that one-state solution, but they can't have any pesky minorities that might threaten political supremacist ideology. That's where we're at. According to Mohammed Shehada, a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, said Netanyahu is now declaring the whole Trump deal, the framework for Gaza, to be null and void. That's what it means in a nutshell. There's no other way to spell it out, which is true. Before we had an inching violation of the ceasefire, well, Israel could potentially deny, oh, no, we just had to, out of necessity, move our lines forward. Now it's undeniable. But will Trump step up and do anything about it? Of course not. Trump doesn't fucking care. He doesn't give a shit about this. I give a shit about it, though. I think genocide is bad and wrong. I think ethnic cleansing campaigns are bad and wrong, regardless of who does them. And the rest of the world does nothing either. And the rest of it, well, and that's true, because Donald Trump does worse than nothing. Donald Trump does continue to protect the actions of Israel and protect Israel from international repercussions, from doing what is obviously, again, some of the most heinous crimes human beings can commit on one another. Donald Trump wants to turn Gaza into a resort. Well, yeah, and the more real estate that's freed up, I'm sure the better deal he's going to feel like he gets, right? That's really all he cares about. And all of this, by the way, is happening on the same day that apparently the UN has now blacklisted Israel, specifically Israel's entire prison service, for finding that there is rampant and systemic sexual abuse initiated by Israel's prison service against Palestinians. This finding is, of course, based upon a number of different victims, a number of different investigations coming together to put the prison service on the UN's blacklist. It's some pretty heinous stuff, and all of this again is happening. Israel is ramping up its military operations against Lebanon. You know, here is a conflict map of Lebanon showing where Israel has bombed and where they've attacked. And handily, you also see where Israel has occupied the Golan Heights, which is a part of Syria. Israel is engaged right now in an all-out expansionist war to seize territory. That's very clear. Israel is trying to seize portions of southern Lebanon under the pretext of saying, hey, this is going to be our necessary buffer zone. We need it. They are seizing the Gaza Strip under the pretext of, well, we need to get rid of Hamas, while also simultaneously having conventions about settling the Gaza Strip. And these attacks on Lebanon have displaced more than 1 million people. 1/5 of the country. An entire 1/5 of the country. Many of those people are not going to be allowed to come back, especially in the territory that Israel controls. There have been some concerted movements among Lebanese civilians to try and do marches of return back to their villages and back to their cities, but many of them are getting turned back or outright shot at by the Israeli military, by the IDF. The displacement orders from the IDF are basically, if you are south of the Litani River to north of the Zarani River, you need to get out. Can't come back. You know, for the defense of Israel, of course. All of this, to me, speaks of a deeply corrupt and deeply perverted campaign of expansion. It speaks to me of some of the most unspeakable crimes that a state can commit. And it really does go to show that when people in the past have said never again, they had some major carve-outs and caveats to that. Like, never again unless we really, really, really want to. And I don't know, I think that's wrong. And I think that we in the United States owe it to just common decency, owe it to humanity, to build up the political power to ensure that we stop this, that we put an end to genocide and we put an end to ethnic cleansing wherever it raises its head. You know, I think that, for example, the United States, I don't know how many people know this, the United States had a plan in place during the Rwandan genocide to disrupt the radio transmissions that were encouraging genocidal violence across the country. And America ultimately decided not to do that because it would be too expensive. And I think that as we build a political movement going forward, we can't be making choices like that. Instead, we need to go forward and we need to build the kind of politics, the kind of movement that gives a damn about other places in the world, not because of what kind of resources we might be able to get, but because of what is right. And it's never right to do ethnic cleansing. It is never right to do a genocide. And so I think that as we look forward to building the kind of future we want for our children and our children's children, we owe it to ourselves to build the kind of movement that opposes genocide everywhere, that opposes ethnic cleansing everywhere, and to build up the capacity to put a stop to it, and to use our diplomatic power, to use our economic power, wherever and however we can, to stop that kind of heinous atrocity. It's happening right now at the hands of the IDF. And it's happened in the past at the hands of countless other nations, including, notably, the United States. And we need to finally draw the line in the sand that never again actually does mean never again. So that's my bold take, which is that we should always oppose genocide and ethnic cleansing. So all that being said, got anything out of this? Join your local Dems, join your local DSA, build the kind of political movement and the kind of political future that you actually want, because you have the agency to do that. You might not have the agency here in the United States, all by your lonesome, to put a stop to ethnic cleansing and genocide elsewhere in the world, but we can do our damnedest to build the kind of political movement here that will enable us in the future to put a stop to that kind of shit. So join your local Dems, make them more progressive, make them more aware of what is happening in the world, make them give a damn about genocide and ethnic cleansing, and join your local DSA and make them more effective. Leverage the power of working people to make the world a better place. Also, folks, if you need help taking those first steps, we can help you. Join our Discord, reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems, reach out to GamerG for help with your local DSA. We can help you get involved. Please do so. And with all that being said, if you got anything out of this, hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, of course, and let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.